I hope you're doing well and have enjoyed the first day of EventTech Live, I guess, so far. So before we get into the session, I just wanted to remind you all that if you got any questions, please submit them via this app or the online software page. You can go via the link or via this QR code, and then Matt will be answering those afterwards. But without further ado, I want to introduce you to our next speaker, who's the lovely Matt Allen, who's the MD at CrowdComms. He will be talking about the challenges of virtual attendee networking and how to overcome them. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you very much. Really pleased that a few people have come to watch me today. Thank you for attending. I really would like some questions because this session is on networking. And we've got an opportunity now that we're in person, we're here, as well as watching from home, that we can actually have a collaborative session. So if you get a chance, ask those questions. I'm going to watch your eyes. I'll be able to see whether people are enjoying it, if they're smiling, which has been quite a nice thing actually, rather than watching via a screen, is to be able to do that. So let's start. The challenges. There are many challenges with virtual networking. I'm going to start off by looking at what networking is, and I'm sure we all know it. But, and I've got a slide which will tell me, I'm going to have a go at just trying to explain it first. Networking is about collaboration. It's about sharing ideas. It's about communicating with one person or a group of people to solve a problem and then end up with a tangible result at the end of it. It can also, and should also, be about having fun. So let's just start off with the actual terminology. The action or process of interacting with others to exchange information and develop professional or social contacts. We're going to talk about why it's tricky, but let's start off with what good networking looks like. And these are just a few of my ideas. I want you guys to share some ideas with me, so we'll see if we can do that. I might have to somehow coax it out of you. I don't know how we'll do that, but we'll have a go at it anyway. So, good networking should be spontaneous. So we want to be able to walk into a room or go up on stage. We want to look at people and we want to say, okay, well, I recognise Rich over there, and Rich is chatting to someone that I don't know. I'm going to go over and tap Rich, and I'm going to say, hello, Rich, who's this? And they're going to introduce me. And it's that spontaneity that I think is really important to positive networking. And it's that spontaneity that's been very much missing with virtual events. So I think that spontaneity is really critical. It's also the simplicity of it. So we're taught as children to use our senses. So we walk into a room, we look around, we look at someone and we say, okay, do they look friendly? We can use smell. I don't know if that's always a positive thing to use, but we've got all of those senses that we've got. And so we walk into that room and we use them, and it's quite simple, isn't it? So we want it to be simple, spontaneous, and fluid. So by fluid, I might bump into Rich, he might introduce me, I might realise really soon that that person doesn't like me, which happens quite often, and then I go, ooh, and I can remove myself. So it's got to be pretty fluid. And then I think as an organiser, when we're looking at good networking, we've got to create an environment for that to take place. So we create an environment like we have here, you guys socially distanced very nicely. We're sat here, but people are walking past and listening. People can come in and join. So we've created an ambience, which I think is really important for like positive networking. So the very difficult one, because you're on headphones, and I don't know how we're going to do this, but maybe we shouldn't have a crack at it. I'm looking at my marketing manager. He's doing this. So, okay. Is there any other thoughts on what positive networking is? Are we able to get a mic to anyone? Is that cheeky? Is anyone prepared to give some thoughts on what positive networking might be? I'm getting in trouble. Oh. Any other ideas? All right, I think it's a no-go. Okay, all right, so we're going to just stick. Are we happy to stick with spontaneous, simple and fluid, creating ambience? Yeah, nodding. Should we do nods or should we do 2 blinks for yes? 2 blinks for yes. That might be a bit trickier for me to find, but okay. So why has it been tricky? Let's focus on that. The expression that I hear very often is that it's quite isolating. So I'm at home, I'm watching on my own. I don't get to look across and see whether someone else is enjoying that experience. Quite a lot of satisfaction that comes from networking or watching a show is not just the watching of it, but seeing how other people react to it. And when I'm at home, I don't get to really see how people are reacting to a situation. We can do a video call, we can do a group call. It's quite difficult. So how are they interpreting that? What's the reaction there? So it's quite isolating. The other thing that I found when watching virtual events and doing virtual networking is that there are distractions from dogs. I love dogs, but there's definitely distractions from dogs. Children, and I love children, but there's definitely distractions. One of my good clients and friends is here, and actually my children are particularly naughty when I'm on calls, and Rosie, my daughter, she had got so fed up with me during lockdown, and I was on a call with Stefano and one of his clients who are great, and my daughter came in and she stood like this right behind me on screen and said, "Daddy, you're taking me for a bike ride." And I was like, "Darling, I will take you for a bike ride, please, please, please go away, please go away." And she stood there for 15 minutes behind the screen, and I've never felt so uncomfortable. I was really distracted by it. I'm hoping the client was okay, thank you. But it was definitely a distraction. The other thing is kind of approachability, but I think it's more accountability. I can be present but not present virtually. It's very difficult. I'm watching you guys and I can see you're paying attention, not necessarily enjoying it, but definitely paying attention. But when you're watching virtually, or if you're participating virtually, it's very easy to stand at the back of the room and to come in for 2 minutes and then to leave for 10 minutes and to drop in and out. And I think there isn't accountability when you're watching in person. It makes it so much simpler, I believe. So I think that's a big one. We'll look at how we can come up with solutions for approachability. Lots of the content is very predetermined. So we don't get the opportunity to walk into a room, see someone, chatting to someone and say, "Brilliant, let's go and chat to them." What we do is we look through a list, we see a name, we see a picture, we book a meeting. I'm not knocking the meeting booking tools, because we're using one here today, which I think is really good, and there's some great creativity within that tool, but it is kind of predetermined, isn't it? I see this person for 5 minutes, I meet them here, I then have a 5-minute break, I go somewhere else, and I think that links intrinsically to that spontaneity or lack of it when we're looking at that predetermined, organizer-led kind of meeting approach. When we're looking at networking, one of the things that makes events work, and it's making this event that we're here work, is the sponsor or exhibitor. And I think in a virtual networking perspective, they've been very much forgotten. And it's really tricky. So we've been spending months trying to come up with solutions that can enable a sponsor or an exhibitor to be proactive in the experience. So what's out there at the moment, and what I'm seeing when I go to virtual events from a sponsor perspective, is if I'm a delegate, I have all the power. I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily, but from a sponsor perspective, it does mean that we're not able to be proactive in getting the engagement or making the contacts that we want. I have to sit there and wait for you as a user to come to us. If I'm at an event like I am here, I'm saying, and my team that are here will know this, go and talk to them. Go on, go out there. Go on, get out there. Go on, they look interested. And so the guys are going into onto the floor and trying to bring people in, asking them questions. And that's not really been viable in a virtual perspective. So it's very reactive from an exhibitor perspective. And we're looking at solutions that we can put together to kind of solve that as well. I've already mentioned sensory triggers, so judgments that we learn from birth, using those senses to judge a situation. So I think we've covered that off. I think at the moment, lots of us technology providers are trying to come up with solutions to these problems. I don't feel that there's one there at the moment, but I genuinely believe that if we find a really good solution, and we're trying really hard, that there's a genuine requirement for it within the industry, and I'm fingers crossed you guys agree with me. So let's go for thumbs up for Do we feel that if we can find a solution, yeah, double thumbs up, brilliant, yay. That's what we like to see. So, okay, let's look at what we're doing to overcome those solutions. I am unashamedly going to show you something we are working on, but that's because we've had these tricky problems to deal with. I'm not trying to flog it too much. If I do that, then you can tell me to stop it. But it's just how we've approached the problem and the solutions that we're coming up to deal with that. So, let's start with spontaneity. So, we want to be able to have those conversations. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's create an environment where people can drop into a space. Let's create an environment where you can look at a profile picture of someone, look at someone's face. Let's drop into a space where you can see who they are communicating with. So we can look at the individual, we can look at their title, we can get an opinion on their face, and we can also see who they're talking to. I'm still relatively young-ish, and I genuinely thought that this was a really powerful and important thing, and people would be comfortable having these kind of making these snap decisions to chat to people. The younger members of my team reference the kind of dating apps where you, I believe, I wouldn't know, obviously, believe that you like swipe when you see someone's face that you like, and then you decide whether you want to see them, and then you message them. So the younger demographic maybe don't mind the lack of spontaneity. I think people my age who are used to walking into a room and trying to network, this spontaneity is solved by this. So we can enter and exit without judgment or seamlessly as possible. So fingers crossed this solves the spontaneity issue which we think we're lacking. Simplicity. So when you're working with technology, we're not trying to fully replicate something, we're trying to digitize it. And actually, the advantage of digitizing something is that we can make it more simple. We can make sure that when you land somewhere, there's like no learning. You don't have to think about what you're doing, it just makes sense. So we enter a space, we go into a networking space, and we can see that people are moving around. Okay, so there's movement, I can move around this room. I can see that there's a conversation happening there because there's 5 faces that are in a little bubble. It's got to make sense. So we're making it much simpler, but we're also, I think, making it almost a level playing field. So if you are younger than I am, or not necessarily confident networking, I think we're actually making this somewhat easier than networking in a physical environment. I remember going on site when I was a bit younger and being really terrified with networking, and I remember having a boss saying, "Go on, get out there and talk to someone," and I remember just going, What do you mean? I talk to people, that's terrifying. And I think this does make it easier. We don't, it removes some of that daunting element of networking. So simplicity, no learning, and actually hopefully making it simpler so that more people have conversations. So it's not a compromise, it can actually be an advantage to network in this particular way. Approachability. So when we look at approachability, what we're trying to do in positive networking is about relevancy. So approachability relates to that relevancy. So at this event here, for example, all of us here are interested in event technology, and that means the conversations we have are relevant because we're interested in the same things. We're interested in solving the same problems. So what we want to do as organisers or as technology companies is make sure that we give people an insight in terms of whether that person provides a relevant conversation to me. So this is where we start looking at machine learning. Can I set my status? How am I feeling? What do I want to talk about? Am I interested in maths, science, or geography? Is it a relevant conversation? And this means that we've both got that simplicity, we've got that spontaneity, but I can also choose and make sure that the conversations that I have are relevant. So I think we're getting somewhere near replicating that physical networking environment now. I'm not saying it's the same, but I think we're getting somewhere near it. And then I talked about the space, the ambience, those environmental elements. So we've got this stage here and this fantastic lectern, wonderful microphone, wonderfully spaced out chairs, wonderful brands all around us, a cafe with nice simmering ambience going on there. It's very difficult to recreate that. But what we want to do in a digital capacity is have highly, quickly replicable spaces. We want to have different spaces that are appropriate for different requirements. So if I'm looking to create like a chilled out networking area, let's have a nice coffee bar that we can drop a 2D image of. If I'm running a big awards show and I want all of my teams to come in and watch the show and sit with their peers and enjoy the moment, then let's create that more customized 2D image. But the key thing is, we're not trying to replicate a physical environment. We're understanding that they're different. We're understanding that we don't want to spend 3 weeks creating a fully immersive space. We want a quick image that we can drop in there that creates some identity, that applies some brand, and that when they drop into it, it makes sense and they don't have to learn how to work with it. So I think we are ticking most of the boxes now. We have a solution. And this solution that we're working on is in beta at the moment. It's more than just a networking tool because we have networking element, but we're also broadcasting into this space. So it ticks that kind of ability to have those ad hoc conversations, but we can also broadcast in a show. So it also ticks that box of let's share this moment with someone else. Now, I was uncertain about whether this would work, and I'm not critical because I shouldn't be critical of what my team are doing, but was certainly hesitant that it was going to be a really robust solution. And I remember on a Friday night, it was during lockdown, and the guys invited me into one of these rooms. They'd branded it up. There was about 15 guys in the room, and everyone was in conversations, and they'd broadcast in David Attenborough, one of his wildlife shows that I struggle to watch now because I'm finding it all a little bit depressing. But they are at the same time absolutely moving and amazing. And I managed to watch this moment and enjoy it with my colleagues and look across and see how they were reacted to the content. And it was literally thought, excuse my French, bloody hell, this is actually going to work. This is good. So we're really excited about it. That's too much plug, isn't it? That's too much. Right, rein it in. Come on. Even Rich is telling me to stop it, so let's move on. We are excited about it, and we do feel that it ticks most of the boxes. Will virtual networking continue to be tricky? And I think the answer to that is yes. I'm a reasonably tactile person, and I've seen people I haven't seen for ages, and I've had a couple of quite nice cuddles. And so you're never going to be able to do that in a virtual capacity. I'm not going to be able to shake your hand or tap you on the shoulder. We're not looking to replace those moments. I think physical events, and I've loved being here because I can see people, and I'm going to enjoy a beer with as many of you as possible whilst this evening. So we're never going to look to try and replace that, but we do have a genuinely viable alternative to networking in a virtual capacity. It doesn't have to be a compromise. It can just be different. Fingers crossed, we've got somewhere near explaining how we would do that. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Oh, I hope there are, as long as they're not difficult.
There is indeed, Matt. You're not going to get away that easily, I can tell you that. Well, first question is, obviously, we all know that human experiences are very important. And obviously, as you mentioned, you're trying to translate some of that into the virtual environment. But are there actually areas where you think the virtual networking can provide more of an advantage than the physical environment?
I think one of the advantages of vertical events has been the adoption. So when we look at the analytics, we know that more people are watching these sessions. So we are giving greater opportunity for people to participate in general. I think when you talk about physical networking, Felix, who's just joined me, it's Felix on my first show, said, go and network, and I was terrified. Thank you, Felix. So not all of us are natural at doing it. And if we can remove some of that kind of nervousness that you get from physical networking, then we're going to encourage more conversations. If we encourage more conversations, then we look back at what networking is. Networking is about sharing ideas. Networking is about coming up with solutions. So if we open that up to a wider audience, which we know we can do virtually, then you're going to be able to get a better solution.
Very true, very true. So we've got another question here is, how can networking be successfully delivered at hybrid events?
Do you know what? I'm hoping I won't offend too many people, but I actually think that we're almost going into... People are getting over-concerned about hybrid. I spoke to a client the other day who's been filming their event physically, in person, for the last 10 years. And so they said, well, what are we going to do? I said, well, you film it every year, in person. And they were like, yeah. I say, so just stream it to the remote audience then. The key with hybrid is making sure that your in-person audience and your virtual audience can watch the same content and engage with the same content at the same time. And if we achieve that, which we can do just by doing all the things that we've been doing for years, running your physical event, making sure that it's amazing, focusing on your content, the quality of content, and then streaming that same content to your remote audience, then that is a hybrid event, much like you are doing here.
100%. And I think, there's an advantage of the virtual environment as well, where you gather the data, right? There's not always the opportunity. You might run into someone, be dragged away, or, there you've got the data in front of you. Do we have any other questions from the audience, by any chance?
Come on.
Well, if not, then thank you so much, Matt. It's been amazing. And we look forward to having a beer with you later on, right?
Thank you very much.